Hello, everyone, and welcome to Classical Revolution here on IDAGIO. My name is Rachel Fenlon, and this is my weekly show in which I get to chat with amazing guests in the classical music world about what thinking outside the box is in classical music, what risk-taking is. Today, I'm joined by soprano Anna Prohaska. Anna has a wonderful international career, which takes her from singing opera roles at the Berlin Staatsoper, where she is an ensemble member, to the Paris Opera, the Royal Opera House, the La Scala in Milan. She's also regular at the Salzburg Festspiele. She performs recitals regularly at Wigmore Hall and the Schwarzenberg Schubertiade. She's recorded 5 solo albums under Deutsche Grammophon and Alpha Classics. And this year, she is the artist in residence at the Konzerthaus Berlin. It's such a pleasure to have her on the show today. Please welcome Anna Prohaska. Hi, Anna.
Hello, thanks so much for the invitation. I'm delighted to be here.
Oh, it's so nice to have you here and meet you for the first time.
Exactly, and hopefully soon in real life sometime.
Yeah, we're both Berliners, so I think we have a good chance.
It should be possible.
Yes. Anna, I love to begin by asking my guests what their earliest introductions to music were and whether there were any particular musical moments that stand out that you feel kind of you can attribute your musical career to.
So that's a tough question because I probably won't be able to remember, since I grew up in a musical household. You know, my mum being a singer, my brother, my older brother, my dad being a director, and my grandfather having been a conductor. So I probably already heard lots of music while I was in my mum's belly, you know, and she actually performed a few shows while she was pregnant with me. So I basically had the music and theatre around me sort of from pre-birth onwards. And there's this story when I was like 9 months old or something, my grandmother came over from England and sang me lots of old English nursery rhyme songs, and they would hear sort of funny noises coming from my cot, and I was sort of trying to sing already, like before I could even talk. So it's literally like, yeah, in my blood. And I sort of tried to avoid it for a while and sort of dabbled in a little bit in writing or art history and stuff like that. But in the end, the family virus did get me, it caught me, and I really, yeah, decided to make a career of it.
Wow, so it started, that's amazing to imagine. And what was sort of the, like, I mean, did you study music with your parents a little bit? Once you kind of decided, once you knew you were going to pursue music, did you?
Yeah, so it all started a little bit with these typical kind of, you know, church children's choir experiences, school choir, where I actually had a fantastic music teacher and respectively a fantastic organist and church chorus leader in Berlin, in my local parish in Wilmersdorf, which really decided to sort of promote me and give me chances to maybe sing a little solo here and there. I would say that started from the age of 13 or 14 with, you know, American spirituals, but also more complex stuff like the Schubert G major mass solo or something like that. And so that's when I really sort of noticed the first time what it's like to be on stage, especially in front of colleagues, in front of schoolmates, you know, which is especially tough because of course everybody wants to sing the solo and you've got to really, you know, sort of make your mark and stand your ground in a sense. And that's when I really got the heebie-jeebies and sort of felt that, yeah, this is what nerves, this is what stage fright is like. So it was a good school. And then I sang for an old family friend of ours, Eberhard Kloke, in Nuremberg. He and his wife then actually moved to Berlin, like right around the corner to where I was living. And I ended up with fantastic, brilliant private music lessons with this amazing conductor and composer, Eberhard, who taught me all sorts of practical things as well, like the conventions of how long a fermata should be in this moment, or, you know, really studying my first operatic roles when I was like 15, 16, which were like Barberina in Figaro and things that I could already in a way sing with the rather untrained voice that I had, but having a good musical ear. And but also in combination with piano lessons, which I'd had from the age of 6 anyway, but sort of more complex in nature, like transposing maybe a slow movement from a Beethoven sonata to another key and that sort of thing as a kind of weekly task. So I would have these weekly tasks and then had to present them, like learning one aria, one song, and one piano piece. And that was basically his payment. That was my, industriousness. So yeah, and that was a pretty tough school. We also had soirees where I would perform these things in front of a closely knit group of musical friends who, of course, knew everything about classical music, and it was pretty nerve-wracking for me. But yeah, I really felt that laid a fantastic groundwork for my studies at Hans Eisler, which I started then with Norma Sharp and later Brenda Mitchell from the age of 17 onwards. Yeah.
Right. Wow, that's quite the story and quite the foundation.
Yeah.
Really well-rounded, it sounds.
But I loved it. I mean, it was never this feeling of being forced to practice piano or forced to learn a song or whatever. I just fell in love with Monteverdi and with Schubert and Mozart, and then later Alban Berg and Webern and whatever. So, and also Kurt Weill and Jerome Kern and Gershwin or whatever. So it was a really broad kind of musical education that I had, also obviously coming from my parents as well, who have a very broad musical taste. Yeah.
You're a prolific interpreter of vocal music. I would say, everything from opera to chamber music and recital. You've sort of kind of tackled so many areas. And I wanted to ask you what you feel, a couple of questions. What do you feel your role as an interpreter ultimately is?
Okay, so that might sound a bit sort of highbrow, but I really do believe that we should be a sort of medium between the composer, what the composer wanted, or the librettist, the poet, and the audience. So in a way, the meaning of the piece and the intention of the piece should somehow flow through us and sort of be delivered to the audience. But I think there's such fine differences between interpreting an art song, for example, and an opera aria, because in an art song, I really do believe in this kind of tradition of like Fischer Dieskau, or what Benjamin Britten and Peter Pears did, is this kind of narrator aspect of it, and not just over emoting everything and not kind of suffering with the lyrical ego in that moment, but actually like reading a poem, you have to do it sort of emphatically and emotionally, but not kind of cry yourself. You want to make the audience cry, if you know what I mean. And in an opera aria, of course, when you're dying on stage, you should pretend to be dying. You really should be in the moment, or you should really be jealous and pretend to be jealous in that moment and really live the character. So there's quite a lot of nuances depending on the genre that you're singing at the moment.
Yeah, I love that you kind of use this word narrator, because something I love about your work, and I've admired about you for a long time, are your albums, and because they have this narrative quality. I mean, I was like revisiting them preparing for today and to meet you, and it really struck me that they're real narrative concepts, the albums. And I mean, I'm wondering, could you talk a little bit about that? What gave you the idea to approach recording like that, and what that's shown you and taught you?
I think it's sort of more, it came from the fact that I was often bored with certain concert formats that seem very sort of workaday and very generic somehow. They say we have a Schubert block and we have a Mendelssohn block and we have a Mahler block. And I sort of love this idea of mixing up various styles, various genres, various epochs and eras of music, but under a kind of umbrella of a theme, like art exhibitions do as well. There might be an exhibition about melancholia, and then everything is a sort of a bit from various ages, And what I love is, and I think that might be the sort of secret DJ in me or something, is I love putting together playlists and seeing, what one how one song leads to another and stuff, but also in pop music. And I thought, well, why can't you do that in classical music as well? And I love sort of adjusting the keys to one another, that it sort of flows into one another like one big suite or a symphony or even a kind of mini opera, you know. And therefore, in a way, telling the story, may it be of a soldier in behind the lines or a soldier's wife, or it might be the story of Lorelei or the Little Mermaid on Sirene or whatever.
No, do you feel like there are certain risks you force yourself to take when you're programming things? What's that like for you?
Well, definitely, because for example, of course, you're always confronted with all these minor and major critics that have you know, more or less a lot of knowledge of the repertoire, but it's often enough just a personal opinion of what kind of voice you would like to hear for a certain song or a certain part of repertoire. And of course, there's a lot of let's say prejudice towards maybe when I was a lot younger and I had a much more, let's say, lyrical voice, or some people would say a lighter voice or whatever. For example, singing the song To the Moon by Rusalka or something. So yeah, but she would never get through the whole role, you know. But I mean, I'm singing it in the context of the Little Mermaid with piano, with an incredibly sensitive accompanist, Erik Schneider in that case. And I'm sort of wondering, you know, why can't people just look beyond that? I'm not demonstrating, I'm not auditioning for the role of Rusalka on this CD. It's just, it fits so perfectly. And it's a kind of hit number. It's something that people love to hear. And it's something that I also love to perform in concert with an orchestra. But of course, it's one of the most lyrical moments of the role. And I'm totally aware of that. But it's the same thing if a conductor asks me to sing the Lulu Suite, for example, by Alban Berg. That is also a much more lyrical moment than a lot of other sections and scenes in the opera. I would say, yeah, sure, I can do the Lulu Suite, but that doesn't mean to say that I can sing the whole role. You know, it's sort of a give and take thing.
Yeah.
So I would say, sorry, the risks, I suppose, might be more of a vocal kind, that one has to switch, or one has to learn to switch between the various styles very quickly, and also the languages, which I love doing. But it's, of course, a huge amount of concentration that goes into it. And it sort of proves again and again that actually one should be singing with the same technique throughout all the styles, and only change a certain sense of style or a certain way of pronouncing things, etc.
I love that. It's kind of going back a little bit. It's interesting to hear that you first were interested in art history and writing, or that you kind of dabbled in that. Yeah. And it just makes me curious. Do you feel like that those interests make their way into what you do as a singer and as a musician? And
definitely.
still?
I mean, especially art history, archaeology, literary history. I mean, I love doing research, you know, on my next role, for example. I mean, I treated myself, for example, to a 5-day trip to Crete in my preparations for Idomeneo, Ilia, which then unfortunately never got performed because of COVID. But still, I mean, it will be forever, and I know I will perform this role at some point. But it was sort of this wonderful, because I just love ancient Greece, and I love ancient Rome and antiquity in general, and archaeology and stuff. And it's just so much fun to actually be singing or performing a role like Poppaea as well, you know, that is actually set in that time frame, which I'm so fascinated with.
What makes you so fascinated about that time frame? What I mean, it's very intriguing.
Totally. I don't know. It's just I grew up with you know, just the statues and paintings from antiquity to Baroque, you know, that depicted the Greek gods, and it's sort of something very primal and very deep in a way that I think the human soul. That's why there's this great fascination for Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones or the Ring des Nibelungen and that kind of thing. That we yearn for these archetypes in our life and in our imagination, you know, the hero, the villain, but also all these kind of in between sort of shades of gray that you have between the gods, that they often act very selfishly and not kind of godlike at all, you know, and they act in a very human way in these sort of antique and in antique stories, you know, and myths. in the Greek and Roman myths. And then, of course, what I love about the whole kind of imperial Roman world is, of course, the intrigue and the, the murder and poisoning and the bloodshed and all this kind of stuff, and the passion, like in Poppaea, in this love triangle between Poppaea, Nerone, and Ottone. And as one can see, not very much has actually changed if you look at American politics, for example, at the moment, which is just so nail-biting and so exciting. And I feel with everybody who lives there and who is sort of subjugated to this kind of volatility of what the people up there are deciding for them and stuff. It's really something that's not so far from the Roman Empire, in a sense. Power begets power, and power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, as they say.
Well, and as we're speaking, I think there's a big debate going on. So there's always, yes, exactly. Lots of.
I know. I just switched basically from the debate to this conversation at the moment. Yeah.
This year you're artist in residence at the Concerthaus Berlin, and this is, it seems like a really cool opportunity to. What does this role give you that you haven't been able to explore before, like curation sides or production sides or creatively?
Exactly. What the most amazing chance was actually one of the smaller evenings that I was able to do, and that I will hopefully be able to repeat again in March. Sort of COVID forbid, not the other way around. Which it was a kind of talking concert, or a conversational concert, that I did with my friend Caspar Franz, the pianist, where we, in the first evening in October, we decided to choose Richard Wagner as a topic, which of course whole libraries have already been filled with his life and his works and his influences. But I was interested in the influences on Richard Wagner, so we called it quite provocatively Der Plagiator, the plagiarist, ? And we wanted to analyze a little bit how he was influenced. And of course, then this whole kind of anti-Semitism debate came in, because he was technically really, really influenced by Jewish composers as well, who he then later completely sort of derided and crossed out of his life and defamed in a way. So that was one of the main sort of topics of the evening. Then of course I sang a lot, and Caspar played and demonstrated, and I kind of used Caspar like his sort of human jukebox and said, okay, now play the beginning of Mendelssohn's Scottish Symphony, and then now play the Todesverkündigung from Siegmund and Brünnhilde from the Valkyrie and stuff. So, and then you would see the parallels, and it was a bit like a kind of live radio show,
right.
Which it totally excited me and fascinated me. And it was a huge amount of work, especially due to the brevity, because it was only supposed to be 75 minutes long, which is so short for such a huge topic. But of course, COVID, no interval, and people needed to air the room afterwards and stuff. So it had to be that short, but maybe it was good in a way to be curbed that way, and to have these boundaries, to be forced to keep yourself concise in a way. Yeah. So yeah, that was fascinating.
And so, it sounds almost like a moderated concert, and
exactly.
Do you have a few more of these? Of course, it's a very different year than intended, but.
So the next one is supposed to be in March, the beginning of March, and that's supposed to be about film composers. We called it Rollentausch, which is switching the roles, but it also, in a sense, like switching the roles of a film, like of a celluloid kind of spiral, whatever you call it.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So it's about composers that were originally classical composers that then went into film, like Korngold, for example, but also composers that are perceived as classical concert composers like Prokofiev or Shostakovich that wrote a lot for film. So that's where we're sort of delving at the moment and exploring the repertoire. There's a fantastic film composer that I love, Miklos Rózsa from Hungary, who wrote, for example, for Ben-Hur and all these big kind of swords and sandals movies, who was a wonderful classical composer, and somehow, in a way, for classical audiences, it sort of tends to cheapen a composer if he writes for film, or if he mainly goes into film music, which I find really unfair and quite sort of snobbish and not right, really. It's not just.
Yeah, actually, a few composers that I've had on the show here, we talk about this a lot, about how, you know, in a way it's no different from opera. I mean, of course, take out that it's not live, and but the concept itself, telling a real story and drama through music. And
exactly, and this is actually a Wagnerian idea of this Gesamtkunstwerk. You know, if there'd been movies back then, I'm sure Wagner would have incorporated them into his Musikdrama, into his evenings, because he wanted to bring as many art forms together at once. And I think film does that. And I mean, what would the great moments of the Lord of the Rings or Gladiator or whatever be without the emotional music behind it, you know?
exactly. Or I mean, I just watched The Godfather yesterday for the first time ever. But that soundtrack, I mean, this leitmotif that comes back over and over, the movie wouldn't be it without this. Yeah,
exactly.
So
or Star Wars. I mean, all
yeah,
the different,
exactly.
which is in the Wagnerian sense. John Williams uses these leitmotifs, and you know, oh, Darth Vader is coming because you can hear the Imperial March in the background and stuff. So, and he also crosses them over and kind of multiplies them like layers sometimes, and sometimes you just hear Princess Leia. Yeah, so it's really really quite intricate, and somehow classical film composers seem to have continued the tradition of sort of tonal music more actually than classical concert composers have done over the last decades, which is also quite interesting. There's sort of this division there in a way.
Well, it sounds like a really fascinating program. I'm like looking forward to it. Will it be digitalized, I'm guessing?
I don't think so. I mean, I suppose it will either be cancelled and hopefully postponed or performed. I don't think it's going to be a stream, to be honest, but I'd have to find that out. Yeah.
But it sounds really interesting. So it's cool. So you get to explore this role, like being a curator, and no, it sounds like a wonderful
absolutely. And of course I had to I had to adapt also to the plans of the concert house. They had some wonderful suggestions of bringing me back together with Philippe Jarouski, for example, which is supposed to be the end of February, who knows, but for Stabat Mater with Andrea Marcon, I'm pretty sure that will be digitalized, so that will be at least a stream. And otherwise there's a big Freischütz concert performance coming up as well with Christoph Eschenbach, because of course it's the Freischütz, the 200 years anniversary of the world premiere in that house, in the Schauspielhaus, which is now Konzerthaus, 1821 by Kai Maria von Weber. So that's a really sort of historic moment. And although the building was of course dreadfully destroyed in the Second World War, it still is that the foundation walls are still the same, and it's still the same place, you know.
Wow. It sort of goes without saying that this is like a very unprecedented time for us artists, and of course, you know, we're all going through it in different ways. And thinking about having this conversation with you today, I kept coming back to the thought that, do you think that after living through this crisis, that we as artists should and will question ourselves in a different way than we ever have before?
I do think so, because judging from various articles that I've been reading and also conversations that I've been having with friends and colleagues, there is a lot of self-criticism there, which is sort of slowly but surely cropping up, and it's I think we have to also be careful that we're not too sort of self-destructive and about this, because we do have the responsibility of somehow carrying on this great musical and cultural heritage, which is in a way a lot more difficult to understand and to grasp than a general generic pop song that you turn when you turn on Spotify, the radio, or whatever. I really think it's very important that there is a kind of emphasis on the fact that it is, you know, just important for our society to make classical music understandable and available for the broad public, which means, number one, music education. I think that's sort of one of the major problems. That's why I think a lot of people don't have access or an emotional connection or even an intellectual connection to this kind of music, because they just can't deal with it. They've never really, they don't know what a sonata or a symphony is, or an art song or whatever. And I think if you just have a couple of years or a few years at school, you know, just going through the canon, the main pieces, the most important pieces, you at least recognize it later on when you hear a tidbit on a stream or on the radio or wherever. And that's, I think we also have a responsibility of really educating, especially kids, but also grown-ups, and welcoming them into this seemingly complicated, huge, complex world of classical music. But it can be so satisfying, and it can be so exciting to hear this music. And I really think, again, talking about concert formats, it's very important to, I think, move away from this idea, oh, you know, overture, solo concerto, interval, symphony. And this has actually been, this is still being sort of carried on, and this is just ridiculous. You know, I think COVID probably will have helped us to break up these concert formats into sort of smaller bits, also not relying so much on flattening the audience's ears by huge orchestral sounds, but also showing them there is a wide range of chamber music and smaller small orchestrated pieces, and also obviously recital repertoire and stuff, which can be incredibly satisfying to hear if it's done well. And of course, you're much more exposed as an artist in that sense. You can't hide in the tutti anywhere and stuff, and it's maybe also sometimes more demanding to an audience, because audiences have to concentrate a little bit more. But I really think that yeah, in a sense, about music education, concert formats, we really have to think about this, and yeah, and really make sure that people recognize the value of classical music. I think also learning an instrument is something that should be absolutely like part of the curriculum of the general public in a school, you know, because as we see from Venezuela to Japan, children's general marks go up when they learn an instrument, when they sing in the choir, when they play in the school orchestra. They're generally better at other subjects as well. And this is what people keep forgetting. Even if you don't talk about the satisfaction of making music and listening to music together and the joy that it brings, just think of the mental outcome of it, and the success that a person might have in their later life, because their horizons have been broadened and their minds have been activated in a way that they wouldn't have otherwise.
Exactly. And I think it also kind of thinking about or using this time to reflect about education. I completely agree with you. And I think that also ensures the future of live theater, because those are things that we really need to experience live, you know? And so yeah, it's sort of more a longer term way of looking at this time, but yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, no, and we're really I mean, everybody's really grateful that there are these streaming possibilities and things, but we really have to make sure that we don't rely on it too much. And also it can get a little bit detached also as an audience member. I know for myself that I'm so much more concentrated on an opera when I'm sitting in the hall, and when I'm at home I start playing with my phone or whatever. It's very rare that I actually get sucked into an opera on screen. And the same thing with a theater performance. With concert repertoire, it's a little bit different, because it's basically only the aural experience that you have, but the with anything to do with visual stuff, with theater, and with this kind of, you know, you want to see, you know, you want to also have the people next to you gasping at the same moment, or laughing at the same moment, or even someone who finds it boring and then you get upset by the person sleeping next to you, because you sort of think, hey, this is great, why are you sleeping, or whatever, or the other way around, you feel sleepy because it's so boring and everybody else thinks it's great. You know, these kinds of mini micro enthusiastic or micro aggressive moments that you sort of have in an auditorium. That's what makes live theater.
Right. Oh, I love that. Yeah. It reminds me of someone else that had said the sort of ecosystem of live theater, which we need all these different elements.
Yeah.
No,
and
I love
of course, as a performer, I mean, there's no question that, of course, performing for a camera or performing for just a wall is less satisfying than performing for an audience. I mean, there was a very, very profound emotional experience that I had just before Christmas, which was in the Elbphilharmonie with Alan Gilbert and the Elbphilharmonie Orchestra, Mahler 4, which was very moving. I was standing in the empty auditorium, and the conductor was kind of the medium between me and the orchestra, which was behind him. And so it was really this, and he was sort of conducting half over his shoulder and always smiling at me. And it was this amazing moment of this sending out energy through the conductor to the orchestra and back again, and that really had a very, very special quality to it. But sometimes streams are set up so that you're actually singing against a wall and just the electronic cameras moving around, and it's really quite yeah, it's quite sterile, and somehow it's sort of I must say, the worst of both worlds, because I love recording in a studio and being able to totally take everything apart, singing small sections, finding the exact right color and expression, and then maybe doing a luxury take at the end where everything sort of comes together, and then fiddling with it afterwards and choosing the best takes and stuff. I love all that. But I also love this kind of live is live experience of no turning back and feeding off the adrenaline and channeling the nerves and the adrenaline into something better and delivering it to the audience that then shows a reaction. May it even be just concentrated silence, but you know that there's an auditorium of 200 or 2,000 people sitting there that are completely silent, all gasping, or laughing, or clapping, or whatever. And that just cannot be recreated through this slightly artificial environment.
No. Which is why, yeah, it's not our long term, but it's what we have. I kind of circling back to you talking about recitals and the intimacy of them, and somehow that there's of course risks involved when it's just you and there's no kind of ensemble on stage. I'm curious, when you yourself have felt like you've gone the most out of your comfort zone, what did that feel like for you?
Oh my God, what would that have been? I mean, it was probably something that I had to do on stage. Probably, I don't know, maybe, yeah. I mean, sometimes the thing is, it's so different, isn't it? Opera and recital, because in opera, you're always pretending that you're someone else. And you can also always say, oh, I had to do this embarrassing thing because the director demanded it of me. I think what I might have found quite disconcerting was when I had to be a very sort of annoying character, like someone who was constantly correcting people and telling them what to do and sending them around. It was kind of like being a bit like an assistant director or a director or something on stage, but it wasn't directed in a very funny way. So I just ended up being annoying and kind of insufferable and not funny, you know, and I kind of knew it, but there was nothing I can do because that was what the direction was like. That's what it was supposed to be. And obviously the costume wasn't flattering either, and it was just, I just felt terrible. And so yeah, but you just have to bite the bullet and do it, and it's your job, and it's just one run of, I don't know what it was, like 5 or 10 performances or something, and then it was over. I think I might have done it twice. But then, for example, in recital, there's nowhere to run. It's just you, the piano, or you and, I don't know, a few chamber musicians, and it's you yourself, Anna Prohaska, standing there and delivering your interpretation of this super famous Schubert song or whatever that everybody knows, and everybody knows exactly. And Elisabeth Schwarzkopf sang it that way, and Brigitte Fassbender sang it like that, and Fischer Disco and whatever. And you've got this constant commentary running in your head about it. And what really helps in that moment is just concentrating on the emotion, on the lyrics that you know perfectly well, and not think about maybe a tiny little mistake that one might have made 3 songs before, and shit, why didn't I sing that note or whatever. It's just you just have to learn to switch off your own sort of subtitles and your own sort of audio commentary of self-criticism, and then just kind of get on with it.
Yeah. I mean, and I guess it's that fine balance of being in the moment and all the preparation that kind of has to be there for you to be completely in the moment, just like an athlete or anyone else.
Exactly. Yeah. Someone who really has to shoot the penalty or jump the high jump or whatever, you know. And of course, it's always a risk, isn't it?
Yeah. Anna, thank you so much for taking time today and for the chat.
Thanks so much.
I would just love to ask you the question I kind of like to end, hence the title of the show, Classical Revolution, Evolution, and ask you, when has music been revolutionary for you? Yeah, that would be my question.
Wow. That's a big question. I'd love to think about that for like half an hour.
Take your time.
You mean sort of personally in my life, or biographically, or politically, or
I
what
would
do you
say,
think?
I mean, I would say personally in your life, but perhaps the easier question or a different question would be, when can it be in general revolutionary?
Mm-hmm.
But if that's easier to answer, or more
Yeah.
straightforward.
I don't know. I suppose it might have been the very first opera that I actually sang, like the first full opera role that I did was Ignol in Pelléas et Mélisande. So it was the page boy, the boy soprano role, which is often cast with a soprano. And I was, of course, exactly in this in-between age between girl and woman. I was 17 and I started rehearsing it when I was 16. And it was really, really sort of a consummate experience for me, with a wonderful friend, Jon Weisbrod, a wonderful director, who's now the husband of Rufus Wainwright, who I then, worked with later on stuff. So that was just a wonderful, wonderful encounter that we could do this together. He was a student of my father's, and Robert Wilson was on the commission. It was his exam piece, and that he performed in Theater am Hallischen Ufer in Berlin. And we had two pianos. They kind of dug up the old kind of two piano version by Claude Debussy himself, and we had a conductor, but it was the whole cast and everything wasn't with orchestra, but it sounded so fantastic because Debussy himself was such a prolific and incredible piano music composer that you didn't miss the orchestra at all, despite knowing what all these gorgeous soundscapes could sound like with woodwinds and whatever, so it was great. And we had this kind of spiral of real ice on stage which melted throughout the evening, and then it became this galaxy and this kind of, and it could have been also the little sheep that the boy is talking about, or also the well and the staircase down into the subterranean area and stuff, and all these kind of mystical places in this castle. And I fell in love with this piece. I fell in love with Debussy's music, and then the connection, to my life and my career now. I finally was able to sing the role of Mélisande, which I'd wanted to sing from back then onwards, and I started to study then when I was 17 while we were rehearsing, because I had a lot of time obviously waiting around and sitting around. And so I think maybe Debussy's Pelléas et Mélisande really revolutionized my idea, and that's when I knew, okay, I was a student, I was studying to become an opera singer, but I really felt, now this is really my job, because there were a few unforeseen things happening, like there was a little accident on stage, and I still managed to kind of continue with my role, and I kept singing the right lines despite what was going on stage, and that was really, really a test of character, I suppose, in that moment. I mean, there are many moments like that, and I could talk about this for ages, but I think this is what really showed me this is the profession that I fell in love with and that I really want to do. Yeah.
Wonderful. Anna, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your little bit of your story. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is really, really fun, and all the very, very best.
Likewise to you for all your rehearsals. Anna's in Munich right now rehearsing for an opera.
Der Freischütz, yet again.
Right. So all the best, toi toi toi, for the rehearsals, and stay in touch, and thank you.
Thanks so much, Rachel.
Okay, and see you all next week.